One Step from Eden is an indie roguelike that you can find on pretty much any platform on the planet. It's based off Mega Man Battle Network and is rather difficult in some parts of the game. Between all of the unique aspects, though, of the deck building, the artifact system, and all of the unique characters to the unique bosses, it makes the game quite enjoyable. But that doesn't matter if you get blasted into oblivion by this random dude with a gun. To explain how One Step from Eden works, there is a grid 4x4 for you and your opponent. You navigate around your grid, and you have to defeat your opponent before they defeat you. Sometimes there's several opponents, sometimes there's just one focused boss, but there's always going to be your spells, your weapons, and your artifacts. Most of the time, at least. Some characters are special. So how do you survive in the world where there's bombs, turrets that shoot you, angry plushies of death, Eden Dev everywhere, same dude with a gun who just doesn't disappear, and JoJo references?
Monkey!
Jokes aside, let's get into the real thing. So the first thing to note of, and the first thing to think about, is how you want to play your character. Everyone's going to start off with Saffron, and she's meant to be played as just about anyone that you want them to be. So you'll be able to choose just about any archetype of a deck. To look at the archetypes and general idea of what they could be, pull up the deck menu whenever you're outside of battle, and you'll be able to see a question mark. Click on that and you'll get a whole list explaining the different archetypes, which I'll explain here. These are the 10 focuses: Anima, Convergence, Doublelift, Glimmer, Hearth, Hexawand, Kinesis, Misery, Phalanx, and Slashfic. They're each unique in their own way, and they all have their own type of goal. First up is Anima. Anima uses Frost, Flame, and Thunder to do various different effects. Once you apply Frost 3 times, it'll do 150 damage to the target. When you apply Flame, it'll linger on the field and do damage over time, and Thunder, just in general, is a very strong attack. The next two are Convergence and Doublelift, and while these two aren't necessarily focused on battle, they're more focused about manipulation, either by manipulating your mana cost, your mana regeneration with Convergence, or manipulating your deck, or using a lot of jam cards when it comes to Doublelift. Glimmer is the focus of light and beams. While that sounds a little bit vague at first, the main idea is anything that shoots in a pattern or is just a general ray is a glimmer. Or if it's got a yellow background and looks like it's going to smite something with light, then yeah, that's probably also a glimmer. There isn't really a ton of synergy here, it's just cool. Hearth is the focus of breaking tiles and using flow. Now, flow is a more complicated mechanic that I'll actually touch upon later, but breaking tiles is pretty self-explanatory. You break the tiles, you can't stand on them. It goes for you and your opponent, so it's actually really good at keeping control over the field. Hexawand is the 6th one down, and it's like if I put this sucker on the screen. But in all seriousness, Hexawand is built around having turrets and structures to defend yourself and do the damage. Pretty simple. Kinesis is all about moving your opponent around the field and making sure that they're in a good spot for you to attack. Or can just be used to generally toss them around like a sack of potatoes. Misery consists of a few different parts: healing, pain, poison, and fragile. Healing's self-explanatory. Pain is self-inflicted damage, which may I say is not a bad thing. It can be very useful in the right situation, especially if it has a good trade-off. Poison is an overtime damage dealer, which in general can be very helpful, and it has backstab, so that's cool. And fragile does extra damage to the opponent when it lands. The last two are pretty simple. Phalanx is focused on protection and shield, keeping you up and alive for longer. Meanwhile, Slashfic is basically if you were given a knife, or at least 2,000 kunais. Now that you know about all the focuses, what do you do now? Well, with all the focuses, it allows you to kind of get an idea of what your deck is going to look like once you get those focus cards. So, plan whatever playstyle works best for you, whether it be a quick assassination type of thing, you like the idea of putting fire all over the field, or you want to be super defensive. Anything works, and the same rule as it is for Eden, and any other roguelike for that matter, is you need to be able to adapt and be ready to change your plan in case things go wrong. With a roguelike, there's almost infinite possibilities, so you could see almost anything happen. So just be ready to make some slight changes if you don't get exactly what you want, but have a general idea ahead of time so you're prepared. Speaking of preparing, the best thing you can do to prepare is to lose. Now let me explain. If you're going to learn the game and be able to fight the enemies well, something to pick up on is that all the bosses have a pattern, and so do all the enemies. Shiso is in the background, and as you might be able to pick up on his pattern, he has a few different things. He tries to trap the player, and then he tries to attack them with quick attacks, or occasionally a very strong one. And that's very much his entire playstyle. He's going to do a few different cycles of a few different attacks, but once you learn those, it makes it really easy to dodge him, and you'll be able to come out on top when fighting him. Now's a good time to point out the fact that obviously there are multiple bosses, so what's the best order to fight him in? Well, some of this is going to be opinion-based, but this is what I hear most often in terms of difficulty. All these are based off their latest game battle, which is basically the hard mode of their early game battles. Gunner's at the bottom prepping a very easy and predictable pattern. Hazel just has turrets, which can be kind of hard to control, but you'll be fine most of the time. Terror-breaking tiles can be difficult, but again, a very predictable and simple pattern. Shiso does a fair amount of damage and can have some sporadic movement. Violet can turn the game very, very difficult if you're not careful, and don't listen to the beat of the music. Celsi is very fast, does a lot of damage. Saffron has all sorts of nonsense, and Reva has just been notoriously difficult. Each boss resides in a certain area, whether it be ruins, ice, fire, or forest. It's all consistent every time. Shiso and Hazel are in the forest. In the fire, you can find Saffron and Gunner. In the ruins, you can find Terra and Reva. And in the ice, you can find Celsi and Violet. What makes this important is that each of them is partially themed. As you'd expect, the fire and ice areas are based on, well, fire and ice. Meanwhile, the ruins tends to have more tile-breaking mechanics almost, and the forest is focused on things like lunging attacks or poison. Remember how I said I was going to talk about flow earlier? Well, here's the brief rundown. It's very complicated in comparison to most of the other mechanics in this game, but it's also very minuscule. Flow gets applied to you when certain cards are upgraded or played at all. And the idea behind Flow is that when you have it, certain effects can activate through artifacts or certain cards will get stronger. These being spells such as Earth Prayer or artifacts such as Luna. The way Flow works is whenever you cast a spell, you will lose a Flow. But if you're running a deck centered around Flow, then it's more than likely that you will be able to get more than enough of it back. And that's kind of the base of the Flow side effect. The other kind of obscure status, you could call it, is the Trinity that can be activated. Trinity occurs when you have 2 to 3 of a Trinity, then certain effects happen on spells once again. These are things like Tri-Shot, Tri-Rag, Trisect, Try anything for that matter, it feels like. But these mostly just enhance the damage once you have enough of the Trinity, and the Trinity stack will go back to 1. The next thing to mention is how the seed system works. In all seriousness, the seeds allow you to learn the map ahead of time, know what spells and what route is going to be available to you, and allow you to prepare accordingly. The last 2 things I want to mention here is 1, if you're worried about a card that does damage to yourself for a trade-off, or if you're worried about getting hit with Fragile, because Beaker and Glass can have that, but they have a really good trade-off. Or if you see the thing Chaos Fragment, the artifact Chaos Fragment, and you think, oh, but there's a bad chance. There's also a good chance. A lot of these have a good payoff. Losing has a bonus to it. Unless you're getting Lucky Coin. If you get Lucky Coin, you better be really lucky, because you're going to lose 200 Sarah if you don't. And speaking of Sarah, the last thing I should explain is the shop and how it is incredibly value to go there every now and then. The shop allows you to buy spells, it allows you to buy artifacts, it allows you to buy upgrade, removals, and packs. The packs I'll touch on last, but the thing is, with upgrades, you can make your cards stronger, you can make them cast twice, give flow, 25% chance to apply frost or flame. Upgrading cards is awesome. Removing cards helps you thin out your deck. If you have something you don't need, or if you have an artifact that isn't helping your synergy, toss it out, 65 Sarah. If you want to go donate blood, donate 100 life for like 20 extra Sarah, you can do that too. So if you're short a little bit, you have options. But the shop is going to be your best friend, because you will get a lot of mileage out of it, and the packs will by far give you the most out of it if you know how to use them. A pack generally makes it so you have a negative side effect in order to get something good, so plus 40 money, or plus 150 max HP. which might seem bad, but as I just said, if you're getting a negative, there's generally a good positive. And here's something really positive. If you buy a removal, or if you just have a removal, you get one at the start of every game. And you see a pack that says, give you plus 150 max HP. You want that max HP. Get that pack. Go scroll over to your artifacts and remove that pact. You still get that 150 HP. Packs are good on their own if you can last them, but being able to remove packs is even better because then you get more out of it for practically free. And yeah, that's most of what I have to say. One Step From Eden is definitely on the more difficult side of roguelikes when you get to some parts of it, but at its base, once you understand the game, it's not that hard and it's a lot of fun to play too, because there's a lot of unique content in terms of the cards and the decks that you can build, because it just has all these different options between Fragile, to Flame, to Jam, to, well, Kunais. Because who doesn't want 2,000 Kunais? If you find yourself at a point where you're struggling a lot with this game, my recommendation is go to the settings and look for Angel Mode. Angel Mode is basically the built-in cheat mode, but it'll help you get in a little bit of practice and help you understand a little better how to fight the different enemies, and it'll help you learn the patterns. Other than that, practice makes perfect, as they always say. But if you have any further questions, go ahead and ask me in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them, or if y'all just want a follow-up video in general, explaining further on like certain enemies' patterns, or mapping on how to get to a place effectively, then I'll do that if this gets well received. But I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, subscribing always helps. I don't do a ton of tutorial videos, but I do have Eden at least once a week on my channel. So, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time.